Welcome to today's interview. I brought on David Alan Arnold. David, welcome.
Heather, thanks for having me back on. I appreciate it.
Yes. We connected through, there was a mutual friend on Facebook. He hit me up and said, hey, I think you'd really enjoy talking with David. And then I did, and I read your book and I love your background. So please share with the audience, where do you live and what do you do?
I live in the city of Los Angeles, and I am a helicopter cameraman. I have been flying for 25 years for Hollywood movies and TV shows. And I have flown every season in a little helicopter for the Deadliest Catch.
And speaking of that, I mean, you shared it with me. I read it in your book. And then obviously this is a little bit timely with Kobe Bryant, his daughter, and the fellow passengers all dying in that heli crash. And so I'd love for you to share your experience. What has that been like for you? And for Deadliest Catch, you've had a lot of, fellow cameramen and whatever go down. And so what is that like? And you shared with me off camera, but Kobe had the safest protocol. Kobe was set up for the perfect ride, and obviously things don't always go as planned.
Yeah, I actually flew over Kobe Bryant for most of his career when he played in the Staples Center. And, nothing in life is without risk. And Kobe Bryant had the best of everything. So if you look at his helicopter and his mode of travel, he really was flying one of the safest aircraft ever made. He was flying the best helicopter that money can buy with 2 jet engines, just like an airliner. And he was flown by the chief pilot of the company. Kobe was not being reckless. I think what happened to Kobe was just a freak accident. It's a lesson to everyone, I think, is to remember that if Kobe Bryant can be taken down, any of us can be, because you are probably 100,000 more times likely to die in a car crash than Kobe Bryant is to die in his luxurious twin-engine helicopter. And so I think the big moral of that story for me is just it's a reminder that if Kobe can be taken in a flash, any of us can. And so it's really important to pay attention to how you live, because we don't know how long we're going to live.
And you know what? That was the reminder for me. I wasn't as connected to Kobe as friends of mine and other, especially males growing up watching Kobe, want to be like Kobe, playing basketball like Kobe. But for me, it was such a reminder that literally the rest of today is not guaranteed. Tomorrow is not guaranteed. And so what you shared with me previously is this whole feeling alive and that we are born to take risks and adventure. And so share that with me.
Well, I do feel that human beings are built for adventure. I don't think we're made to take it safe. And our culture is so affluent that we, in a almost comical way, as a people in the United States, we have pretty much pushed every form of risk out of our lives. And that existence, I think, is very foreign to the human psyche. I think that the human spirit craves adventure. And so to live and work in big ivory towers filled with cubicles, for which every form of possible risk has been removed, there's just no element of danger whatsoever in our lives. And I think that that's a really kind of an unhealthy way to live, actually. And I think it actually psychologically, it leaves people out of balance. That's why I believe people argue so bitterly on Facebook and social media, I think is because there's just that part of their spirit that yearns for a meaningful adventure, and they're not getting it. So when they start to argue over politics on Facebook, they just go straight to the carnal core, because it's just that part of their spirit that's looking for a place to get out and go at it.
And that makes sense, looking for an outlet. And I get it, because I worked in corporate. I did the corporate gig for a decade, and it felt like jail to me. I couldn't do it anymore. And I think that's why so many people live for the weekends and their next vacation. And But question for you, talk about taking risks. I mean, you've had many fellow friends and coworkers go down in helicopter crashes, and you're still doing it.
I have, you know, that's one of the most painful chapters of my life. I'm almost 48 years old, and the worst pain I ever felt uh, was when one of my friends was killed in a helicopter crash, and that story's in my book. And I'm not sad in a sense for him because he lived the way he wanted to live. He loved his life. And my friend David was a carpenter before he became a helicopter pilot. And so he, unlike 99% of people out there, he didn't live his whole life and career as a carpenter. He went for it. He quit the steady, guaranteed paychecks of carpentry work, and he went to a crazy, ridiculous adventure of being a helicopter pilot, flying around the world. And a single day of his life is worth 100 lifetimes of what most people allow themselves to do. And so I wasn't, you know, really sad because I grieved because I lost my friend, but I can say on the other side of the coin, he lived the life he wanted. And I think that if you do that, I think you'll die without regrets, which is a lot better than living to 100 and never doing what you want to do and never taking the risks that you know you were made to take.
Well, and there's plenty of articles all about the number one regret of the dying is playing the woulda, coulda, shoulda game.
Yeah, I think Kobe is the prime example. We don't control how long we live. That's not up to us. What is up to us is what we do with the time we have. And I was just talking to a friend of mine, you know, forget helicopter crashes. A friend of mine just lost his buddy to pancreatic cancer, which is I believe pancreatic cancer still has a 99% fatality rate. And so before his friend passed, he moved to the beach because he always wanted to live at the beach. And he and I were talking about it, and it was very similar story to Kobe Bryant's. It was just his life was suddenly taken by a disease. And so many people, you know, they're not diagnosed with cancer. They live long lives, but they never move to the beach.
Yeah.
And they die. They live their whole lives and they die. And there's great mathematical reasons for why they never move to the beach. But the point is, I think that humans are meant to live at the beach, and we're meant to do the things that really call to us. And so I think if you move to the beach or if you fly in a helicopter and something bad happens to you, I think the bottom line is you got what you wanted from life, and that to me is so much more important than living to be 112.
On that note, I've also seen it or read it written that you know, he was 76 years old, but he died at 25. He stopped living at 25, and it was going through life's motions those last 51 years or whatever.
Well, that's what a lot of us do. I find that people entrap themselves. So most people that I know don't enjoy being parents, and they're just so freaked out and stressed out the whole time. They have kids, they buy a house they can't afford, their bills are too high, they don't have enough money every month. So it's all they can do to just scramble and scratch and claw to try and pay the bills every month. And meanwhile, the kids are a nuisance. You know, they don't have time to enjoy having kids and raising them because they're so stressed out of all the stuff they have to do. And that's just almost a pattern that people fall into. And so I think that rather than trap yourselves, rather than trap yourself in bills and stuff that you think you should have, I think it's a far more important thing is to go for the things you dream of, even if you don't have the money for it. Just go for it. And I guarantee you that dying without regrets is so much more important. than living to be 112.
Gary Vee, he literally just posted this week, stop buying things that you don't want to impress people
Yeah.
you don't like. And I think somebody else said that. But I think that is the truth is, and what you said is, go live at the beach or fly the helicopter or take the vacation there. I believe when you go after the things you actually want, the how will unfold for you.
Yeah, the how comes always in a way that you really can't see coming, I believe. When there's a story in my book where I found this ridiculous, crazy, aggressive dog running in traffic, and there was no talking to this dog. This dog wanted to kill anyone that came close to her, and I had not a clue how I was gonna get this dog off the street so she wasn't run over by a car. B, uh, keep a dog. I had no way to keep a dog, but I just knew that that's what I had to do, and it was like a calling. This bizarre thing where, like, this was a dog that nobody else would go near. This dog was running in traffic all day long, and nobody went near that dog because she was crazy, and she attacked anyone who came within 50 feet. And I certainly didn't have a plan. I didn't have a clue how in the world I was going to make that work. But I just set very small goals, one of which was to sit next to the dog and not get bit. So I got that done. And then after 3 hours, I got a leash on the dog. So that's done. And we walked the dog to my car, and my buddy had been trying to help me get the dog off the street, and she bit the crap out of him. He had put big gloves on and had reached under a parked car to try and drag her out, and she just mauled his hands. And now I've got this crazy dog on a leash. We walk to my truck, and he looked at me and he looked at the dog and he goes, well, what are you going to do now? And I said, I'm going to pick the dog up and put her in my truck. And he goes, you are? Like, it was just unthinkable that anybody would touch this Tasmanian devil. And he was exactly right. There's no thinking reason to even attempt this. I just knew I had to make it work. And that's all I knew. And so I reached down, I picked up the dog, put her in the truck. And then, like you said, in a very unexpected way, when I got this crazy dog back to my place, and I took a garden hose and I started washing the motor oil off of her. She had no fur on her back, just scabs, just raw, like, wounds. And just in this bizarre, unexpected twist of fate, underneath all that dirt and motor oil and scabs was the most loyal and affectionate dog I have ever seen. I'm 48 years old. I've never, ever seen a dog that was as devoted to me as the Switch the dog was. And so every day was like that. It was just this crazy process of trying to figure out what in the heck to do to get her through the day. Like, I couldn't leave the dog with anybody because she'd attack anyone that she saw. So how I was going to solve this puzzle every day, I didn't have a clue. I just knew I had to do it. And then, like you said, every day, like an unexpected way, some little miracle would happen, and we would survive and get through it. And then she would snuggle up with me at night. And that's how we lived for 13 years.
Hmm. That's amazing. And I think that's such a metaphor for life, that so many people have this scabbed motor oil front or cover. And if we could just love and kindness and give to them what's really underneath.
Well, that's how kids are. I watch kids. I find that people don't spend time with their kids. They usually just give them an iPad. And therefore the kids tend not to know how to behave. And whenever I volunteer at my son's schools, and whenever I go in, I always tell the teacher to put me with the problem kids, because there's kids in there in those classes that just yell and scream and throw stuff at the teacher. And that's what they do all day. And so the teacher moves them to, like, one corner of the room and just doesn't even pay attention when this kid is yelling and screaming and throwing stuff, because they have to get through the lesson. And I have found that those kids always respond, just like the dog that I rescued off the street. She was crazy and maniacal, and she had wanted to kill anyone who came near. But because I took 3 hours of just sitting on the ground next to her, she got comfortable. And come to find out, this hell on wheels beast was actually craving someone to, like you said, to treat her with love, and then she would love in return. But no one was doing that, and that's why no one went near the dog normally. And the kids are the same. I find that these kids always respond. It's just like they bloom if anyone pays attention to them. And so when I go to the school, I'll get the one crazy lunatic badger of a kid, and whatever the task is, I'll just sit down with them. I'll talk to them about the task, where normally they're by themselves, right? So the teacher gives 30 kids a job to do. Okay, you build this house out of cardboard or whatever the task is. And so the kids all work on the house, except for this one kid who's just going to throw the cardboard across the room, you know? But if you sit with that kid and you focus them on the task, and you don't let them wander off and throw things, they just bloom. It's just like it's the strange thing that a lot of kids who misbehave are just looking for someone to pay attention to them.
Yeah.
And if you're willing to do that, what you may find under all of that is a really gifted little person, who's just not adjusted to this world of institutions and schools and stuff like that. But if you just treat them as a human being and walk through with them whatever they have to do, it's an amazing turnaround that you can see almost immediately.
And I think that's an amazing example, whether it's kids at school or trust me, adults do it too. Any form of acting out is simply a call for love. So
yeah, it's funny. You mentioned my books. I don't know if you haven't read the second book, have you?
no. And what is the title of your first for the listeners?
The first book is Help from Above, and it's a series of books. The second book in the Help from Above series is called What Lies Above the Clouds. And I encountered an organized crime ring that had set up shop at a school bus stop. And just like the crazy dog and just like the bad kids in school, everybody was ignoring this incredible monster at the school bus stop. So within 6 months, law enforcement would not go near the place. Anyone in town, no one in town would even look at the place. They were so afraid of the killers at the school bus stop. And I found in an unexpected way, because while they were there, I would always just walk up to the building and beat on the door. And whoever answered the door, I would talk to them. And sometimes I wouldn't get to the door. Sometimes they would barge out of the building because they saw me coming. And they would come at me like heat-seeking missiles, just ready to fight, just tattooed gangbangers, with chains hanging from their waists and big biker boots on their feet, just looking to fight. And they would charge out of the place. And as they got closer to me and they're like yelling profanity and stuff, I would say, I'm sorry, what was that? I didn't hear that. What's your name? I'm Dave Arnold. How are you doing? What do you do here? And it was a bizarre thing that like you said, by treating them with love and being polite to them and talking to them as human beings, they did not know what to do. If I fought with them, they knew exactly what to do. Right. But because I was kind to them, it blew their minds. And I told all of my neighbors who originally were with me and would have a weekly meeting. Everybody would get together and say, how are we going to get these gangsters away from the kids at the school bus stop? And I told them, I said, look, you're looking at this all wrong. Those bad guys are the key. They're not just the obstacle to fixing the school bus stop. They're the key. They're the ones that are going to unlock this for us. And in 2014, one of those guys led us to one of a body of one of their victims they had murdered. And that whole story is in book 2, What Lies Above the Clouds. But to your point, it was kindness, it was love that opened the door, because if I wanted to fight with those guys, it just would never end. It certainly wouldn't have ended the way I wanted it to.
I feel like you definitely embody fearlessness. So where did that come from?
I'm just not that smart. Um, I'm very honest in the books about getting myself into trouble with no plan of how to escape. And as I wrote those true stories in the books, we have a documentary producer. There's a series that's going to come from the books. And our documentary producer read a rough draft of the books. And he was the one, because originally all of the books were written about the school bus stop and the gangsters. And the working title was Worth Fighting For. This documentary producer read the rough draft of that, and he said, Dave, I'm sorry to tell you this, but you have to call these books Help from Above. And so I said, okay, I'll do that. And I think the reason he wanted that, one of them, was because the books are just full of stories of me getting myself into situations that no thinking person would ever go near. And half of the time, I'm just not clever enough to avoid the trouble that's coming. It's like you said, the magical doors that can open when you attack an impossible task. Everyone knows to stay away from trouble like that. Everyone knew to stay the heck away from this organized crime ring. And sadly for me, that meant leaving the children in harm's way. But everybody who encountered this situation was willing to do that because they knew it wasn't worth the risk to them to cross these guys. And I'm just the one guy in the room in a situation like that who's just never smart enough to figure out, why I shouldn't be doing something like that. I just look at it very simply. And so
See,
that's why I'm sitting in traffic at night with this crazy dog that no one else will go near. I just can't think of all the reasons not to do it. I just look at it very simply, and like it's probably a form of autism. I just look at it and go, okay, I have to save this dog. There's no way to save this dog. There's no way to avoid the danger of being bitten. But I just know I have to save the dog. And so I keep moving forward, even though it's not a good idea.
I think you need to give yourself more credit. And I think it's a lot more, you just have a lot of courage. But my question for you would be, what is a key takeaway you want listeners to get from this conversation about risk and living your life to the fullest?
Well, I think the key is not, I'm not going to tell anyone how to live, but I do think that Kobe Bryant is a wake-up call. Kobe Bryant flew in the same helicopter that Donald Trump flies in his civilian life. There's no reason to expect that he would ever have a problem in that helicopter. And he was gone in a flash. His life was over. And so I think the lesson to take note of and to pay attention to is that if Kobe can be taken without warning, any of us can. And therefore, if you're not doing the things that make you happy every day, that you love to do, if you don't jump out of bed every day and are excited to go and do your work, then you should pay attention to that and find a way to move towards the things that really light your candle, because that's why we're here. That's why we're alive, is to do those things. And all of the other things that suck up all your time and energy and keep you from the things that you love are probably, you should get rid of those.
I love that. Okay, so then I have a few rapid fire questions for you to wrap up today's interview. The first one being, what is a quote or motto that you live by?
Quote or motto. So one of my favorite quotes is Martin Luther King Jr. And he said, if a man is called to be a street sweeper, he should sweep the streets so well that all the hosts of heaven and earth look down and say, here lives a street sweeper who did his job well. And I used to have that quote when I worked in corporate America. I used to have that quote stuck to the wall next to my desk, because I really believe in that.
I love that. The second question for you, what is a book you're currently reading or highly recommend?
Current book that I'm reading, I recommend my books, Help from Above series. They're unconventional. I'm not an author. I'm a cameraman. So they're a pretty funny, sort of twisted take on books. It's just me saying whatever I think. And I really do recommend an unconventional story like mine. Is a great way to. I've been told it's an entertaining adventure, and I'm trying to defeat an organized crime ring, and so that's the other side I didn't talk about. Is I am trying to get these guys caught, and I want everyone to go to prison who allowed an organized crime ring at a school bus stop. So people reading my books is the first step to getting justice for the kids.
Final question for you. What advice would you give your younger self?
My younger self, I don't have any advice from my younger self. I do live without regrets. So I wouldn't take any of my problems or disasters back. They've all helped me in some unexpected way. So I just don't have any regrets. And I would say, kind of more like what you say, don't be afraid, because no matter how bad it looks or sounds or feels, you will get through it, and just keep going, because I'm happy where I am.
I love that. And such a great note to end on. David, thank you so much for joining me and sharing your story.
Heather, thanks for having me on. I always enjoy talking to you, and I always enjoy listening to your show. So it's a really kind of a thrill to be on your show.